Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of my channel, Thinking About Morality. And in this episode, we will be talking about the moral hazard theory. Now, what is the moral hazard theory? It is a theory derived from economics, actually. And I took AP macroeconomics this year, and I just learned about this theory. And I thought that it actually has some very interesting applications in the real world. Now, for a simple definition from Wikipedia, the moral hazard theory is defined as moral hazard occurs when an entity has an incentive to increase its exposure to risk because it does not bear the full cost of that risk. For example, when a corporation is insured, it may take on higher risks knowing that its insurance will pay the associated costs. Now, this example is very interesting here. A corporation is insured. Now, what does insurance impose on a person, or in this case, in a corporation? Well, insurance is basically a way to almost write off losses that benefit you. I mean, the whole idea of insurance is that it's supposed to benefit both parties. One party helps with insurance and is able to pay off huge amount of costs, while the insurance company is supposed to incur a profit just by having many consumers all sort of pay into this sort of social security, which is very interesting. But what happens is this corporation, let's just say that it gets fire insurance, it knows that if it gets fire damage, it lights on fire, their building blows to pieces, they're going to get a huge sum of money to pay for that. Now, what happens when this happens is the corporation seems to have this sort of ignorance to this idea that they don't have to now watch over their building and just be on it for fire all the time just because they know that they'll get money back from their insurance company. I mean, this is a very greedy way to look at it, but that's the truth of it. They don't have to spend as much time, installing sprinkler systems and having a quick, call to the fire station. Instead, all they know they have to do is just pay their insurance every month. It's, that's the basis of the moral hazard theory. And I think it has a lot of merits and benefits to society just by thinking about this theory, because it shows that sometimes, an entity or the corporation, it can be a person as well. I'll explain about that too. But a person can be ignorant to some of their choices. And I think that's something that not just insurance does, but many other things. Now, these many other things can be almost anything. Everything in your life might have a moral hazard theory associated with it. And what I mean by this is something even as simple as a seatbelt in your car. Now, what does the seatbelt in your car do? Well, every time you get in the car, you put it on. And it sort of seems like it's an inconvenience to your life. You put it on and it's supposed to make you safer. That's the whole idea of it. It stops you from getting whiplash. It protects you from getting thrown out of the car. And that's the whole point of it. When you get in an accident, it's supposed to save your life. Now, that's a pretty big deal. Something saving your life is not something to be ignored, for sure. But what also happens when you put on that seatbelt? You get this false sense of security. False sense of safety, I mean. It gives you this ignorance. Now, how exactly does it give you this ignorance? Well, putting on a seatbelt, what it really does is sets into your mind and your subconscious that you're safe in the car and nothing can hurt you, nothing can kill you. And with those two things in mind, now that you know that you could die in your car, but now this seatbelt is sort of subconsciously telling you that this will save you. So it gives you this sort of new reckless driving because you know that. I mean, it happens all the time, People think that they can drive home drunk and they end up killing people. And that's a little different scenario, but cars have this sort of safety culture associated with them, They have airbags, headrests to stop whiplash, and other devices in the car, they have sort of this crumple cushion thing where if you get hit, the car crumples from the outside in to protect the drivers and the passengers. And all these devices were invented and gadgets were invented into the car to protect the person. But it does protect the person. It does a lot. But it also gives this recklessness in the driver. And, you know, if you really wanted to change how many automobile crashes there were, I think the reality of it is you'd have to change the culture around the car. And looking at the moral hazard theory is very interesting, because you have to make sure that people know that cars are dangerous. I mean, that's something that has to be repeated over in their heads. And the reason I say repeated is because every time I step into my car, even though I got my license only a few years ago, you get this sense of, it's this awesome just driving in the car, rolling the windows down, music up, just vibing. And sometimes you can't look at it that way. You have to look at a car as a dangerous vehicle and a privilege to have, and something that you should just be careful using, because if used in the wrong way, you could kill somebody. I mean, that's the reality of it. And so, seatbelts. Should they be used? Now, obviously, yes. If somebody else is reckless driving, it could save your life. But we can't just think of one person. We have to think of the society as a whole. How can as many people benefit and as many people stay alive as possible? If you took out every single safety device, people would drive differently. There's no doubt about that. They would drive more safer and slower, because they know that there's nothing there to protect them. I mean, if they get a crash, they're going to die. And I think that's a rude awakening, but it's something that may be necessary to save as many people's lives as possible. Now, this may save lives in the short run, but now what about the long run here? Let's talk short run, long run here. They talk about short run versus long run a lot in economics, so we should also apply it here, because this is an economic-based theory. Now, in the short run, people would drive differently. They would drive safer, slower, etc. But in the long run, would they not go back to their original, systems that they have in place, where they're driving, they're a little tipsy, or they're driving recklessly, or they're using their car a ton just to zoom around? I mean, it's possible. It's possible that even if you change the culture of cars this instant, in the long run, it might go back to the old culture where cars are just this blissful thing. And, a lot of people say ignorance is bliss, or Mr. Orwell would, but who knows? Maybe the ignorance of never getting in a crash gives you this sort of immortality view on the world, and it's not a good thing to have, especially when you're putting other people's lives in danger. So, anyways, that's the moral hazard theory for you, or at least my rundown of it. And I was thinking about how the moral hazard theory would relate to cars, in the sort of sense that cars could be changed for the better. But who knows? I mean, it's interesting to think how the moral hazard theory works and the costs associated with having, a gadget or insurance that gives you this almost false sense of security, and sort of lessens the risks on the person with the moral hazard theory, like the corporation with insurance. It totally changes their outlook on their fire insurance, and what happens if they got a fire. They feel like, oh, we'd be good because we're protected. So anyways, just to give you guys something to think about. I hope you guys like this episode, and comment if you guys want to hear anything else. Thanks for tuning in.